Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. Move-on orders are being pitched as a way to reclaim town and city centres. The government is proposing a law which would allow police to order someone rough sleeping or begging to leave a public space for up to 24 hours. They could be fined up to $2,000 or 3 months in jail if they don't. Critics say that does nothing to create homes, risks criminalising poverty, and simply shifts people and the problem from one street or suburb to another. Today on The Front Page, Community Housing Aotearoa Chief Executive Paul Gilberd joins us to talk about the real impact on people experiencing homelessness. Paul, what was your first reaction when the government announced this news?
I think disappointment would be the first word that would come to mind, and I'm speaking as the CEO of Community Housing Aotearoa. We've got about 160 members across the country. We walk alongside another organisation which is called Te Matapihi, which is the Māori, independent Māori voice for housing, and so they have dozens and dozens of groups and hapu and iwi that they work with as well. So probably there's 200 organisations that we represent, and I think it's fair to say that we unanimously would prefer to do what works instead. Move on legislation and enforcement-led approaches don't work. They haven't worked anywhere in the world. Take a look at the USA right now, where they have mass encampments of people outside of town centres who've been dumped in a field somewhere.
I mean, so in terms of looking at the world-based evidence that we have at the moment, if you look across to, the US, like you say, it hasn't worked there. Is this basically, I saw Bernard Hickey actually write in his latest column about this, being like basically the Prime Minister doesn't want Chuck and Mary getting off their cruise ship and feeling intimidated by homeless people and looking at homeless people next to a Dior store. So is it basically we're just going to move them on because we don't like seeing it?
Fundamentally, yes. That's the driver for this piece of legislation. It doesn't just displace the people, it also displaces the unmet needs that they have. So the problem doesn't go away. We're not addressing the root cause here. There are multiple root causes. I would sort of point listeners and viewers in the direction of the cumulative deficit of the last 35 or 40 years of our national underproduction and under-delivery of affordable housing for low and moderate income households. So we've got a substantial cumulative deficit across multiple governments that dates all the way back to the reforms of the late 1980s and early 1990s. So there's a lack of adequate low-cost housing. But then you need to layer on top of that the health issues and the mental health issues and the addiction and the things like the methamphetamine epidemic that we have in New Zealand at the moment, that for many New Zealanders is quite invisible and they're not aware of. And so there's a lot of complexity in here, but displacing it and avoiding dealing with the underlying root causes is not going to make it go away.
What percentage do you think it would be that there are genuine disorder incidents in the city, say, affecting the public versus it's just not nice to look at?
So, look, police up and down the country have been doing a very, very good job of this. I want to put a shout out to our men and women in blue who are on the beat and doing a great job. And so there are many available tools in the toolkit to address antisocial behaviour, assault, drug use, local government bylaws that control drinking in public spaces. So all of those things have a threshold which allows for police and security services to intervene if that threshold has been crossed. We agree that all members of public and people running businesses have the right to go about their business unfettered and unmolested. Totally agree with that. However, characterising rough sleepers and homeless people as gangsters, as has occurred in the last 48 hours, with linking it in some strange way to gang patches, We reject the mischaracterisation of rough sleepers and homeless as a criminal element. That sure, there are occasions when that spills over, but more often than not, what the police tell us is happening is that it's often groups of people who've had one too many, who are in town on a Friday night, and who are causing violence and issues. Often our streety population are hiding from that cohort because they're often the victims of it. And so I think we need to place these issues where they are and where they belong. And we do not agree with the blanket characterisation of poor people and rough sleepers and homeless people as a criminal issue. It's a health issue, it's a housing issue, it's a mental health issue. There are other more effective ways of approaching it that we've proven are very, very good ways of helping people get off the streets. And there's no better example than the Housing First program and the outreach services that our providers deliver in conjunction, I should mention, with the police and with council staff across the country.
This has been a problem for us for a long time as a country, as we continue to see people that choose to make the pavements somewhere that they want to live. And not only is it a safety issue for them, it's a big safety issue for the residents, for the people that want to come into our CBDs and enjoy them, for those people that are trying to run businesses and their employees. And so there was a gap in the way that we were able to actually deal with that. And I think that the move on order is not a panacea. It takes a whole lot of different actions to be able to deal with these issues. But this is one of the actions that we think is going to make a big difference to making sure that we don't have people living on our pavements and on our streets.
What are some overseas examples that have actually worked?
Okay, so let's start with Housing First. Now, that's funnily enough, it's written on the can what it is. It's a philosophy, first of all, which says that if you've got people that are in need, if you put them in an adequate, warm, dry home first, you then have a stable platform upon which to deliver other services that may or may not be needed. So Housing First started in North America many years ago. We, as Community Housing Aotearoa and other providers, were involved in bringing Sam, who set it up in Canada and the US, to New Zealand. It's been operating here very successfully for a number of years as a program, and effectively what it does is it goes out into the community, out onto the streets. It engages with streeties and rough sleepers where they are. It brings them into a system of stability which starts with a house and then provides additional services around health and mental health and other things that need to be addressed from the stable base of a home. And so that's working. And in fact, this government has acknowledged it's working because they've just invested more in it quite recently, and that money's now been deployed, admittedly only across Christchurch, Hamilton, Wellington and Auckland, but it's been delivering really great outcomes. So that's one example that's here in New Zealand, proven, tested and can be scaled. And another example is in Wales. They've kind of been leading the charge. And I think it's worth mentioning this because what they've achieved is a substantial and sustained reduction in homelessness in Wales. And it started with the Housing Wales Act 2014. So they've got 10 years of solid data now to show the permanent reduction. There was obviously some issues with COVID, but they've sustained a reduction. And that really puts the onus on particularly the agencies of the state not to discharge or release people into homelessness. And it's called a duty of care and a duty to assist. And then there's another duty underneath that, which they've just reinforced with some additional legislation this year in Wales, which says if you've got someone in hospital or in prison or in residential psychiatric healthcare, for example, don't discharge them into homelessness. Kind of makes sense, right? Because then
it
you're going
does
to have
make sense.
Yeah, so at the moment, just to tell you what is still happening in New Zealand is the paddy wagon turns up and releases prisoners with a few $100 in their pocket and no accommodation, nowhere to live. It doesn't take much imagination to realise what's going to happen in that situation. And so the Welsh have built a really robust system that is proven to work now over a period of more than 10 years of actually, let's get a housing plan in place if we're going to discharge people from hospital who are really sick. Otherwise, we're just going to have to treat them again. They'll turn up back in the A&E, or they'll turn up in corrections, and that's between $500 a night and $1,000 a night. Why wouldn't we do the sensible economic thing and the ethically correct thing and get a housing plan in place which is much lower cost, and it's also the right thing to do?
It's interesting you bring that up, because we've done on this show a couple of times, we've spoken about oranga tamariki, and similarly, they don't have a duty of care. So once a kid turns, 18, they're sent off with a few $100 in their pocket, and that's all. So we're really not very good at the duty of care thing, hey?
There's a lot of really good people. If I'm honest with you, there's some really great people in MSD, in the Ministry of Health, in all our hospitals, with our police, with our nurses, but our system at the moment is not very well integrated, and what we're experiencing at the moment and what's turning up visibly on the streets, although, by the way, it's the tip of an iceberg. There is a much larger number of people who are what we call invisible homeless, who are sofa surfing in grossly over-occupied dwellings, etc. But what we're seeing is people slipping through the gaps. And so in some ways, even at the same level of resourcing that we're putting in right now across health and social services and housing, if we just connected a little bit more, and that's where the Welsh are onto a really smart thing where there's a duty to collaborate. What they're really saying is you guys need to talk to each other before you release or discharge somebody, because we actually have some really good systems, some really good people, and some really good programs and solutions that are running, but sometimes people are falling through the gaps and now they're spilling onto the street.
Do you think there's a real sense? I think the messaging is not great, right? Because I've seen the Police Minister, Mark Mitchell, he's explained it on ZB this morning, saying, look, the government's hoping that more of these move-on orders will nudge homeless people and rough sleepers towards social services. Now, that's all well and good, but it doesn't really work in practice. And the messaging around this is, yay for businesses, you're not going to have any disruptions, or city centres, or you're not going to see this in the street. Do you think that they should have been, more focused on rough sleepers when they come out with this? And B, what would you say to a shop owner who is happy about this decision, who has had rough sleepers outside their door every morning and is genuinely worried for their safety?
Yeah, I mean, we're all in this together. And like you, I listened to the release and saw Paul Goldsmith and Mark Mitchell and Simeon Brown there talking to it. I think they were in Auckland yesterday when they did their stand-up. Our reflection and observation has been that the police are doing a really good job. And what is most effective is when we're working together. And so to that shopkeeper, I would again say, hey, let's do more of what works. And what's been working for a number of months now across many urban centres, I think the rest of New Zealand must get a little bit tired of Auckland because there's a lot of talk about Auckland, but Auckland is a good example because council staff and our providers, our outreach providers, have been going on joint visits and connecting with rough sleepers and streeties where they are and getting them at scale into some awesome innovations, particularly like the day program, for example, that is running. We've got various day programs where there are safe places for streeties and rough sleepers to be during the day, to sleep unmolested, and to do some creative stuff, do some art, do some music, do some other things, and most of all, be together in a safe place because you might not know it, but there's a really strong community within the rough sleeping and street community, and it's important for them as it is for all of us to spend time with each other socialising. And so don't be afraid to get on the phone and call one of our providers if you've got a concern, and we'll respond. We have outreach teams and we can come and help meet people where they are, and to the shopkeeper that might be on the front door of your shop. But enforcement-led approaches that just displace the problem and kick the can down the road are not the way to go. Let's do what works instead.
Something that being homeless is illegal?
No. What we're criminalising is a refusal to follow a move-on order. So when police come along and say to somebody, if you're being disorderly or doing one of the behaviours that's outlined with this legislation and you refuse to comply, then you can be arrested.
But then what is the offence? Is it if they're rough sleeping somewhere and they're told to move on, does that mean the fact that they were just rough sleeping is not allowed?
What is criminalised is refusing to follow a move-on order, and that's what we're trying to do. We're wanting to reclaim the streets of our city for the enjoyment of people who come and live here and work here.
I see these comments online, and this is a conversation that's being had time and time and time again. But I'm seeing a lot less compassion for rough sleepers, right? I'm seeing more people just be bothered that they have to walk past someone in a blanket on their way to work every morning. I'm seeing people, frustrated that they pay taxes and people on the street begging or window washing or what have you don't have to. Do you think that we just need to become more compassionate towards each other and understand at the end of the day, one wrong turn, this could be you?
Yeah, I think a couple of really good points you've made there. And many, many New Zealanders are one life event away from this sort of possibility being in their future. There are now over 180,000 households. That's not people. So a family is a household of 5 maybe, or it could be someone living on their own. There are over 180,000 households across the whole of New Zealand who are now paying over 30%, 40%, 50%, even up to 70 and 80% of their income on rent. And so if one thing goes wrong for you, the car breaks down, you can't get to work, you lose your job, out you spill. And so it could be you, it could be me, it could be any of us. And I think that's a helpful reference point for people when they're having that awkward moment on the street of walking past a rough sleeper, just to reflect on. Compassion is hugely important. And we're at a critical juncture, I think, now as human beings in Aotearoa, New Zealand, considering what sort of a place we want to live in. Because if you want a view of the future, go to the States and see what enforcement-led approaches have led to there, and I interviewed a professor from the University of Texas on this last week. They have these huge encampments just outside of towns and cities all over the country. We have the beginnings of one of those in the red zone in Christchurch now, where a lot of streeties and homeless people are beginning to build an encampment. Is that the sort of society we want to be and want to live in? And I think it's important for all New Zealanders to understand that homelessness is a political choice. We made a bunch of choices over the last 35 years in terms of our policies and our funding settings, and this is the fruit of those choices that we've made, and we have the power and the resources to make different choices. It's really up to us, but it's up to all of us, not just community housing providers and the police.
Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Absolute pleasure, Chelsea, anytime.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is hosted and produced by me, Chelsea Daniels. Kane Dickey is our studio operator, Richard Martin, our producer and editor, and our executive producer is Jane Yee. Follow The Front Page on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for another look beyond the headlines.